Well, good morning. My name is Tobin Castles, and a couple years back, I don't live far from here, and I saw this building that got refurbished and this new sign on the church, and I said, I'm gonna have to come by here and worship, and sure enough, I did. And from the very first time I came here, I have felt the presence of the Lord, and our family has really enjoyed worshiping here. This is a special church, and I think it's going to be neat to watch this church grow. And so anyway, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be in this pulpit today. I don't take that for granted. But the title of this message is "In This World You Will Have Trouble," and I've developed this message not long after I got a really bad phone call that no parent wants to get back in 2014, and it was a phone call that said your 21-year-old son is dead, and as you know, it's 11:30 in the morning, and you get that phone call, and it's difficult to describe what that's like. There's no air in the room, and I could go on and on. But it's been 7 years since he's passed. Brandon, who worships here, was his best friend, and Brandon's brother Chris married my daughter Rustin, and so and then Turner. I didn't expect one of Toby's friends to surprise me here, So anyway, let me just get back on a positive mindset for me. Let me show a few pictures of them. So we've got a couple pictures you'll show. That's Toby. Next picture is him and his girlfriend, Georgia. They dated 4 years up until the day he died. And we had a great relationship with her, and our families loved each other. She was clearly going to be our daughter-in-law. We'd already determined that. And then there's one more picture, just me and Toby, not long before he passed away. But I know there's a lot of hurt in this room right now. And that's really the point of this. I mean, if we go around and talk about the pain that's in everybody's life in here right now, I think we'd all be surprised. You may not have had a child die, but your pain is just as real and hurts just as bad. Maybe there's some health issues going on here, right here. You or somebody close to you. Maybe there's some addiction issues in your family. Maybe there's some relational problems that are overwhelming, whether it be divorce or any kind of relationship problems. Maybe there's financial burdens that just seem like there's no way out. I just know this: life can be hard and life can be painful. And I want to share 5 thoughts from Scripture that's helped us as we went through our storms. And maybe something here might be a tool for you. And so there's 5 points that I'll make, and some I'll be real brief on, and some I'll be real long on, but they're all important. They build on each other. So let me get right into it. And point number 1 is simply this: in this world, you will have trouble. Okay? It's just going to happen. Jesus told us this. And in some ways, it helped me in grieving the loss of my son to know that trouble should be expected. I'm not just being picked on. Okay? I'm not being, and so the question is why? Why is there so much hurt? Why is there so much pain? And I think it's really simple. I don't want to oversimplify this, but to me it really is simple. We live in a broken world. We live in a broken world, and it wasn't designed that way. So if we want to understand pain, we got to go back to the beginning. And so I'm going to look in Genesis chapter 1, and then this won't be on your screen, but it says, there was good creation and a good rhythm in creation. God created light, and he saw the light was good, and the earth brought forth vegetation, and God saw that it was good. And after he created Adam, God saw that all that he had made, and it was very good. When God created the Garden of Eden, there was to be no death. There was a tree of life in the middle of the garden. There was going to be no sickness, no pain, no anything bad. But God gave us a choice. He didn't program us like robots that we will worship him and obey him. He gave us something called freedom of choice. And there was one thing. He said, just don't eat of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And you have the power to make that decision. And we know what happened. And after that, everything changed. There will be some verses on the screen here. This is right after they ate the fruit, verses 17 and 19. And to Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. We broke the world. Because of you, Adam, and guess what? We've kept the family tradition going. The cursed is the ground. Through painful toil, you will eat from all the days of your life. You will produce thorns and thistles. Anybody feel like you got thorns and thistles in your life? Well, this is where it starts here. For you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat the food until you return to the ground, since From it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. So death enters here. We are in a cursed creation, the sweat of the brow. He goes one step further, and this will be on your screen, verses 23 and 24. So the Lord banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken, and he drove the man out. He placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. Everything has changed. No more Garden of Eden. No more tree of life. You can't get back to the tree of life. And the world's now in a cursed condition. Disease, conflict, natural disasters, hurricanes, war, death are a few of the byproducts. And we broke the world. That's why I never, it's okay to be angry with God. I'll even talk about that later. That's why I never got angry with God about Toby dying. We broke the world. We broke the world. And so anyway, point number one is, in this world, you will have trouble. Prepare for it. Expect it. It's going to come. Point number two. Second part of this verse says, but take heart, I've overcome the world. So the first part of this verse, you can leave it up, please. The first part of this verse is depressing. It's discouraging. Hold on. If you're not in the middle of a crisis right now, give thanks, but put your seatbelt on, because one's coming. One's coming. And it happened because we live in a broken world. But the second part of this verse, is the best news ever. See, he didn't just leave us here. He knew what we were going to do in advance. He's all-knowing. He saw what we did, all the sins that you and I have done, and starting with Adam and Eve. He saw how we've messed this thing up, but he provided a way out at his expense. God became flesh, and he dwelt among us, and he had to live the perfect life. And that was the key part. We always talk about he died on the cross, but he had to live the perfect life first, or it would have been meaningless. He had to be the unblemished lamb. And then he suffered. Do you ever think about it this way? He chose the way he died. He chose the cross. And I could get off on a 10-minute extra. I won't. He chose the scourging. He could have had, if you were a Roman citizen and you were sentenced to death, you had your head cut off. He could have had his head cut off. That's what I'd have done. All right, I'm going to die for you. Line me up, get it all over. He chose the way he died. But in that process, he defeated sin. He was buried. He rose to life. And through this, he defeats sin, he defeats death, and he overcomes the world. And the good news that we're celebrating today is that we're in Christ, we overcome the world too. The book of Revelation is written to encourage us what the second coming of Christ is going to be like. This won't be on your screen, but 22:3 says, there'll no longer be any curse. So the curse that came on the world in chapter 3 of Genesis is lifted when Christ returns. There's no more curse. And then 21 verse 4 says, he will wipe away every tear from your eyes, and there will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. These things have passed away. No more crying, no more death, no more pain. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. It's hard for me to totally grasp that, because all I live in is this world that has pain and hurt. But I believe with all my heart. And that's why we're here today. In this world, you will have trouble. Point number one. In the next world, we will not. I find comfort in that. That leads me right to my next major point. Point number 3. Life is short. Eternity is long. Billy Graham was once asked, if you wanted people to remember one thing, what would it be? And he said, life is short. We need to be reminded of this. We need to be reminded, because we can begin to live as if this world is all there is. As believers, we get caught up in this world when the good things and the bad things, and we can act like this world is all there is. When you compare life to eternity, it is extremely brief, folks. 90 years is nothing. I need to be reminded. See, when I'm in a storm, here's the deal. When I'm in a storm, I really need to be reminded of this, because I tend to be too worldly and tend to be focused too much on the world in my storms, right? When my focus is on the world, the pain of losing Toby is hard to take. And all I can think about, we're in a family business, and I still work with my 92-year-old dad who's here today. We go to work every day. My 92-year-old dad worked with his 87-year-old dad till he passed away, and my son was going to work. He'd been working the family business since he was 14 in the summers, and so that was going to, all I can think about is I'll never get a chance to work with him. I'll never get a chance to see what his children are going to look like. I'll never get a chance to know what he's going to be like as a 40-year-old, what kind of man he would become. And I could just get so wrapped up in that. There's no hope in this tragedy of my son dying if this world is all there is. There's no hope. And so if I'm not careful, I can begin to live and think as if this world is all there is as I dwell on my problems. You relate to that? And it can chew you up. And it can be depressing, and it can be dark, and it can make you not want to get out of bed. Because this world is all there is. All I can see is my problems, and all I can see that. But then I remind myself that he's in heaven and wouldn't want to be back here if he could. And then I think about it, it's not going to be that long, and I'm going to be there too. I mean, even if I live another 30 years, that's like that. And then there's going to be no pain, and there's going to be no tears. There's going to be no torn ACLs, which he had, and there'll be no migraines for his mother, and all those things. The verses that I really camped on, excuse me, the verses that we really camped on right after his death, and I don't know how God took me right to these, but I don't really, but I just kept going to them. It's Colossians chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. It'll be on the screen here. But since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. Now this is good advice in good times, but it's really good advice in bad times. Really good advice. Folks, we have to deal with our problems. I have to grieve the loss of my son. If you've got cancer, you have to deal with your cancer. You have to deal with your divorce. I'm not suggesting that. But we don't set our mind on it. That's the key. We don't just like, this is all there is. It's all there's ever going to be is my illnesses, my divorce, whatever. Don't set your mind on it. Set your mind on things above. You still got to deal with your issues. Clearly, you got to deal with your issues. But don't set your mind. And I thought about this, this thing about not working with my son, which seems so big. I'm past that. I'm past that. I started thinking, 1,000 years from now, you think I'm going to be in heaven going, this is a pretty good place, but if I only could have worked 10, 15 years with my son, I'd be happy. You think I'm going to have those thoughts? Is it going to matter? But it seems so big and important now. That's the point. We got to keep an eternal perspective. We got to keep. Now, Apostle Paul went through more suffering than I imagine anybody here will ever go through. And this won't be on the screen, but I'll read it real quick. Some of the verses that you've heard before. And Paul's telling about his suffering. He goes, 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and day in the open sea. I've been constantly on the move. And he goes on and on and on. That's bad stuff. So how did Paul respond to all those storms? Listen to what he said, and I think this will be on the screen. And he said, therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. Listen to this verse. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes, the other verse said set, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary. It's not going to last. But what is unseen is eternal. Now I want to challenge Paul. How do you think being pelted and left for dead for stones is light and momentary? Or burying your child, or going through a divorce, or getting a cancer diagnosis, or dealing with an addiction? Is that light? Part of me goes, Paul, how can you say that? You're not being real with us. How can you call these things light and momentary? But he is being real with us. He is being real with us. His view is not 10 days, or 10 months, or 10 years. 10,000 years. or 10 million years. He has the eternal perspective. And in light of eternity, our troubles, no matter how bad they are, will be light and momentary. There's a verse that I'll read to you real quick. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. It's going to be better than we ever imagined. I mean, we all got these visions of what heaven's going to be like. Scriptures, you can't even imagine what it's going to be like. You can't even imagine. So when going through a storm in your life, I'd encourage you to remember life is short, eternity is long. Now, that's not going to take away all your pain. It's going to help you get through your pain, though. It worked for Paul. I'm learning from Paul to keep an eternal perspective. In this world, you will have trouble, but it's short. In the next world, you will have no trouble, and it's long. So now I'll come to point 4. We're not in control, but we can control how we respond. And I want to talk about the first part of that first. We're not in control. Anybody here like to be in control? Yeah, I like to be in control. And I had it all planned out with my son. I was going to work the next 30 years with him. I actually bought a lot across the street from my house that he was going to live, where he was going to live. Didn't ask him really whether he wanted to live there or not, but I had it. And that's where his children were going to grow up, and they were going to walk across the street and swim in my swimming pool. And he wasn't going to have a swimming pool, see? And his wife was going to be Georgia. I'd already counted her as my daughter-in-law, and had it all planned out. Maybe you've got a lot of things planned out, and I don't know if there's anything evil in that, but we're not in control. You know, one day, his girlfriend Georgia was visiting us after Toby died, and we're real close with her still, even to this day. But she was driving off, and me and my wife were on the porch waving to her, and my daughter just under her breath goes, "There goes our daughter-in-law." Had it all planned out, So we need to be reminded before the crisis hits that we're not in control, but we can control how we respond. And here's a key point of this: how we respond tells the world, and it tells God, who we believe in and who we trust in. And this is, I think, a profound statement. The greatest testimony you will ever have is how you respond in a crisis. It's easy to have faith when things are going good. It's easy to love God when things are going good. And I've learned that from watching my wife, Pat. Pat would be here today, but she can't get out of bed due to migraines. I think she's probably listening to us, but she has had a headache for 15 years. She's got a curse of chronic migraines. She literally has a headache every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It's just a matter of how bad it is. She can go days upon end where she doesn't get below an 8 on a 1 to 10 scale. Now, sometimes you hear about people with migraines for 3 hours, and I sympathize with those folks. She goes years, 15 of them, in fact. But she can go days where it doesn't get below an 8. And then when it would go more than a week where it wouldn't get below an 8, and I just try to imagine that. Nausea, all that. We would have to go to Chicago to a clinic there called the Diamond Headache Clinic, where there's a whole floor of hospital people, of patients like her. And she would stay 9 to 14 days with this medical infusion to try and break, because the migraine would be set in, and she'd try to break it. And we were averaging about 45 to 50 days, nights a year in the hospital in Chicago. Now, they would come in 9 to 14-day chunks, but if you do the math on that, that's 1 out of every 8 days. For years, we were in a hospital in Chicago. Very, very tough. But it's amazing as I watch her. She can't control that, but she can control how she responds to that. And she's never got angry with God, never turned her back on God, never quit trying to be the good husband, the good mother. And so it's just amazing how she does it. I don't know how she does that. And what a great testimony she has. And then you put on top of that losing your 21-year-old son, the emotional pain on top of the physical pain, and you can just see how it'd be easy to get lost in depression and to just give up. But she doesn't do that, and I'm so thankful for that. And I hope you're listening. But anyway, but one of the ways we got through this and when she gets through that is when my son passed away, we grabbed hold of a verse. Psalm 55 is a psalm that David wrote, and he was going through a difficult time. And he ended the psalm with this beautiful phrase that we grabbed hold of. But as for me, I trust in you. And that's kind of the verse we grabbed hold of. And sometimes we just need to repeat that when we're starting to not trust like we want to. But as for me, I trust in you. Come on. But as for me, I trust in you. And we do. We trust in him that he's going to help us through our storms. We trust that he's going to that he's overcome the world on the cross. We trust that we're going to see our son again. We trust that he's going to prepare a place for us. And we trust that our troubles will be light and momentary compared to the eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So how are you going to respond when trouble hits? Because it's coming. I'm not asking you if you're going to trust God to take the headaches away. I want to ask you if you trust God when the headaches don't go away. Or I'm not asking you if you trust God to keep your children safe. Are you going to trust God after you bury your children, or after your divorce, or after your cancer diagnosis, or after you're losing your job? We need to decide what we believe in and whom we trust. And there's one more thing I'd like to say, too. We need to know him before we need him. You see so many people turn away from God in a crisis, and the more shallow your relationship with God is, the more likely that could take place. So we need to just grow our relationship with God all the time and stay in his word and stay connected to believers but this life can bring us trouble. We can't always control it, but we can control how we respond. Do we trust him and we try to honor him? Well, that leads me to my last point today, and it'll be my longest point. But point number 5 is when a crisis comes, we need to be prepared to jump into 8:28 mode. And what I mean by that is Romans 8:28, and the screen will show us that verse. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know in all things that God works for the good for those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Now, so this is a condition. Leave that up, please. That's a conditional promise that God makes to all of us. He promises that he will work good in all things. He doesn't say all things are good. The death of my son was not good. My wife having migraines is not good. Your divorce is not good. But he will work good in all things, conditional, if we love him. Now, love him, and are we called according to his purpose? And what's his purpose? I like to say it this way, that his purpose is to be shared and exalted. We to share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ so that everyone can come into right relationship and that he can be glorified and exalted. That to me is what the purpose is. Are you called to that purpose? Now here's a harder question. Will you be called to that purpose in the midst of a crisis? If you want to see 8:28 take place in your crisis, you have to be prepared to jump into 8:28 mode immediately, or you can miss the opportunity for God to do good. Because he's only going to do it good if you do those two things. Now, let me give you some examples. You're probably going, I'm not with you. Manual 9 shooting. Dylan Roof. Imagine if your spouse was one of the ones killed in the Emmanuel shooting. How would you have responded? This punk little kid, white kid, comes into the church. They welcome him. They have a Bible study or a prayer group. I'm not sure which. But they were with them for about an hour, and then all of a sudden he pulls out, shoots everybody he can, tries to kill everybody. What's his motive? To start a race war, pure evil. So your spouse is one of the ones that got killed. How do you respond? If you respond like most people, if they would have responded like they could have, maybe even should have, it being a human, we'd have seen massive rioting, protest, all kind of negative stuff, race relations getting worse and worse and worse, and Dylan Roof would have been successful. But do you remember when Dylan was on a video and they could talk to him? They weren't in the same room, but Dylan Roof they could see him and they could talk to him, the family members. It was like right after, it was the next day or two. I can't remember exactly. It's been a while. And they talk to them about, we forgive you in the name of Jesus. They're publicly, and race tensions got better, not worse. Our president sang Amazing Grace on worldwide TV, and he sang it pretty good. I was pretty impressed with his voice. I don't know if y'all remember that, Obama. The flag came down. I bet Dylan Roof was really irritated about that. He's trying to create a race war, and the Confederate flag comes off the Capitol. But my point is, this isn't about the Manual 9 and how you feel about that. This is about those people jumped in 828 mode, and we said we're going to glorify God in our crisis, and God worked good. Well, Apostle Paul is another great example. He wrote Philippians. He was in his fourth year of imprisonment. He's been in jail 4 years, waiting for the emperors to make his final decision. Now, God went to Paul and said, Paul, I want you to be my guy to take the gospel to the Gentiles, right? You're my man. And Paul says, all right, give me my sight back, and I'm in, right? He blinded them, Damascus, right? So can you see how frustrated Paul would be? Going, God, I thought I was your man. I'm in jail for 4 years, not 4 days, not 40 days. You've left me here. I'm rotting away. I'm not making any use of my skills. I quit. Find somebody else. Look at how Paul did. He didn't do that. He couldn't control his situation, but he could get into 828 mode. And so before I read the scriptures, let me remind you that Paul was chained to a guard on each side of him. I was told there were 6-hour shifts. I don't know, maybe it was 8-hour shifts, but let's just say 6-hour shifts. That means there's 8 guards he was chained to a day, every 24 hours. Now, I'm going to read the scripture, and I think it'll be on the screen. No, it's not going to be on the screen. But this is Philippians 1, 12 through 14. Listen to what he says. Now, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me, being in jail, has really served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I'm in chains for Christ. He's chained. He goes, hey, you know Jesus? Let me tell you about Jesus. And those guards were probably going, God, this guy won't quit talking about him, you know? But so it's become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I'm in chains for Christ. Because of my chains, most of the brothers in the Lord have been encouraged to speak the word of God more courageously and fearlessly. Paul goes, he used his crisis to advance the gospel. And because he jumped into 828 mode. If he'd have gone in there and go, this is terrible. I got this. I'm wasting my talents. I don't want to do. I'm done. No good would have walked out. But here's something else. He also wrote 4 books of the Bible in that prison. He wrote Philippians, Ephesians, Colossians, and Philemon. And here we are, thousands of years later, just one of many churches that are reading from Philippians today. And here's the thing. Paul never knew in his life all the good that God was going to do through those letters that he was writing to a little teeny group of believers in the church of Philippi. He had no clue what God was going to do with that. Now, he does now, but that's how Romans 8:28 works a lot. You don't see the good. You don't even know the good. Or you don't know all of the good, okay? Well, anyway, so losing our son was the worst thing that's happened to us up to now. And we tried to jump into 828 mode. We were trying to be very intentional about that. And there's so many stories I wish I could tell you, and I don't have time to. And but I'm going to tell you some, and I hope it's not too many. But it starts with the funeral. It was a very, very large funeral, and so we tried to be very intentional about sharing the gospel in the funeral. We had 3 great preachers. I won't go into who they are, but one of them was a guy named Adrian Dupre. I don't know if any of you ever heard of him, but he's an evangelist and the best public speaker of bringing people to Christ that I've ever seen in terms of getting a group of people to give their life to Christ. He is the absolute top person I've ever seen. Well, he gave an invitation message. We really were focused on Jesus in the funeral. Focused on Toby in the beginning, focused on Jesus the rest of it. And roughly around 100 people raised their hand as a first-time profession to Christ. And I always don't get hung up about those numbers. You know, you're like me. I'm like, oh, probably 2/3 of them weren't really real. You know, I don't know. But I do know this: even the ones that maybe weren't a true heart belief, that was one step closer to making a true heart belief. You know, so I don't get hung up on how many hands went up, and gosh, but about 100 hands went up, okay? And what was amazing was these young people, in all honesty, this group of young people wasn't talking a lot about God before Toby died. I mean, I'm just, they were in college, they were, in fraternities, and they were doing the things that their daddy was doing when I was their age. Now I think Toby knew Christ. That's not, but anyway, I won't get into that story. But they weren't going to Bible studies once a week and that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? But after this death happened, there was this openness, there was this opportunity where they were open to talking about it and thinking about it and getting conversation about it. It was just really weird to see, and so we immediately started saying we need to get a group together. We were thinking 10, 15 of his friends together and have Adrian, that evangelist, come in and speak to them again real soon after his death. And anyway, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And 18 days after his funeral, we had 150 young people come to a fellowship hall. We had a Salsaritas buffet set up. And then Adrian gave this powerful message. He gave an invitation to salvation, and 8 to 10 young people stood up in front of their peers. Now, they're saying, I've been going to church all my life, but I'm going to stand up before you and say I never had a heart belief, which I was pretty, this isn't this was not every how do you say it? Head down, nobody's looking, and it wasn't just like stand up, and everybody's okay. She stood up. Well, then he gave an invitation for those that maybe are Christians who, almost like a recommit. He didn't use those words, but want to get serious about their faith. And just show these 3 pictures real quick, just so you get to see and this was in response to, so that's Adrian, the preaching his 4 chairs message. The next one, and this is what them coming forward to the recommitment. So, and then one more, a little closer. But this is 18 days after Toby's buried. There was opportunity. These young folks were willing to have conversations. But then I have another friend named Bill Jones, who's the best one-on-one evangelist I've ever seen in terms of conversationally one-on-one. And he met with my daughter, and my daughter came to the conclusion that her Christianity was more of a head knowledge instead of a heart belief. And she met with my nephew. My nephew's now wife, who's here, Bailey, and then their friend Delaney. All 4 of them came to Christ. Let me show you a text message I got on the screen. Another one of Toby's really good friends. I won't read this to you. You can read it. He's saying, look, I'm going to be in town this weekend. Will you talk to me about Jesus? I mean, that's unheard of. I mean, they just, and so October 31st, 2014, Halloween Day, this gentleman came over to my house. We got in the backyard, and I'm not really good at sharing the gospel one-on-one. I mean, I can do it, but I'm not good at it. But God used it, and we knelt down. He prayed to receive Christ, and that was October 31st, 2014. Well, October 31st, 2020, last October 31st, I had the privilege of officiating his wedding and doing Christian marital counseling with him, and this is all a lot of good. Well, so my friend Bill Jones goes, well, these young people are coming to Christ. We got to get a Bible study going. So me and my wife started a Bible study in my house. We started with 5 of them, and we really weren't even trying to grow it. We just were, taking my daughter and Bailey and my nephew, and we did it for 3 years, and over 32 young people ended up coming being part of that. And it was just, can you imagine the good it was for our family to have our son's friends and my daughter's friends coming into our house once a week? Because Toby died, they were there, and now we're focused. I mean, it was just Romans 8:28 for us. And then I'm going to tell you 2 more little quick stories, and I'm going to move on. So I'm going to show you a text I got next from a friend of mine whose son was Toby's age, and a good friend of Toby's. And so if you'll show the text, I got this on July of 2019. And so this is from my friend. He says, happy 4th, I love you, man. Look what Taylor brought to the beach and had in his room. It's the Toby ripple effect. So Toby died in 14. We had Bible study to 17. This is 2 years after the Bible study ended. And if you show the next picture, that's the Bible. I gave every person an engraved study Bible that came to the Bible study. So that does my heart well to know that that 5 years after Toby died, he's taken his Bible to vacation. Now, I don't know if he opened it, but he was at least thinking enough to take it. And then this past Wednesday, this just a few days ago, I got another text from another one of the guys. Because I thought about you this morning and want to talk to you about marriage advice. I want Christ to be the center of my marriage. And you and Miss Pat have been a great example of that. Can we talk on the phone sometime next week? So this coming week, I'm going to have a conversation with another one of his friends. I bet you're wondering who it is, aren't you? Which one of the ones said that? But that's just Romans 8:28. But all right. So anyway, so the first couple times I've done this message about 4 times. The first couple times I've done the message. I wrap it up right now, put a bow on it, and it's over. But God showed me something in the last couple years. There's more to this that's got to be said because not all suffering is going to end up in feel-good stories like I'm just sharing, even if you're in 828 mode. I'm not saying God's not going to work good. That's not what I said. I said, just because, I don't want to leave you in the impression that all you got to do is jump in 828 mode and you're going to have all these feel-good stories in your cancer diagnosis and your divorce. And that's just not true. And that's what God showed me. And I think back to my wife. She's been suffering for 15 years. And we were in Thanksgiving. We were in the hospital in Thanksgiving in Chicago a couple of years ago. I'll never will forget this. And she's been in a 9 migraine the entire week. She's nauseated, which that makes it even worse. A 9 migraine with nausea is a lot worse than a 9 migraine without nausea. And she had nausea. And this was her exact quote. I'll never forget these words. There's no ministry in this. I'm not helping anybody through all of this. There's no feel-good stories here. There's not people coming to Christ. And boy, I was just like, what do you say to that? What do you say to that? And there was some good. We could talk about what a great example she's been for me and other people, and she's affected nurses. And there has been some good, but honestly, this is how it is. That's not good enough. That's not enough good for the suffering. Come on, Lord, because she's trying to be in 828 mode, but she is in 828 mode. She's not trying. And but let me tell you something that's going to encourage you about, and maybe this would relate to if you have suffering. And we're going to look at a verse again on the screen that we've already looked at. It's from 2 Corinthians 4:16 through 18. But let's read this again. Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. Now, here we go. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, etc. Well, I read a book by Charles Stanley called Adversity, and he was talking about these verses. And the next slide will show you a quote from Charles Stanley about these verses. Adversity in this life, when handled properly, and those are key words I'm going to come back to, when handled properly, provides for the believer glory and honor in the life to come. In this passage, Paul speaks of glory as if it is a tangible thing which can be progressively added to. More glory, more glory, more glory, more rewards. More, it is as if each believer has an eternal account wherein glory is being applied in relation to personal suffering on this earth. Now, first of all, we got to handle adversity properly. We got to be faithful to Him. We got to point others to Him. We got to trust Him. We got to lean into Him. We don't want to turn our backs on God. Now I got to put a little asterisk. That doesn't mean you can't have tough conversations with God. Now I'm starting to get. I'm not an ordained minister. I'm giving some opinions here, so I'll let it know. In my lay opinion, it is fine to be angry with God. It is look at the book, and I say that I base my opinion based on Scripture because I can look in Psalms, and that's God's word that He's given us, and you see where the psalmists, some of the various psalmists, are having very tough and direct. God wants us to be transparent. God, he knows what you're thinking. If you're mad, tell him you're mad. If you can have, it's nothing wrong with having tough conversations. I don't think tough conversations blow up your chance for Romans 8:28. I really don't. Now, I don't want to stay mad at God. I want to work. I don't want to turn my back on him. I mean, I can go back and forth with him. He's a big boy. He can take it. Okay? Work through it. Tell him everything you're feeling. But you don't turn your back on him and go the other direction. So you got to handle your adversity well, and trust him and lean into him, and then there's glory. Because here's what happens. We're going to go before the judgment seat of Christ, and we're going to be judged for what we do with what we've been given. That's what we're going to be held accountable for. Now, let me tell you why I say that. Parable of 5 talents. Okay, this is a parable of what the guy who had 5 talents made 5 more, and the master comes back and says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful for a few things. I'll give you charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." Then he goes to the guy with 2 talents. Doesn't have as much talent. Your talents could be money, it could be ability, influence, whatever. But some people have more stuff, more talents, gifts, skills, influence, resources, opportunities. But there's a person with 2 talents, and they earn 2 more. And the response was the exact same response as the person with 5. "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." He didn't have to get 5 more talents. He just had to do, And think of the widow with two coins. This is my favorite one. And Jesus says she put in everything. Let me tell you something. That widow has more rewards in heaven than I will ever have. What did you do with what you've been given? That's what we're going to be judged on. She gave it all. I mean, and what about Pat? What has she been given the last 15 years? Pain and suffering. How she handled it. She's kept a good attitude. She's leaned on God. She's tried to point others to God. There's not 10 salvation stories I can point to you. I can't give you a lot of feel-good stories. We don't need them. God's seeing. I can see that. I can see the angels looking down, and they do look down. They say they rejoice when one sinner repents. Okay. So I can see that. So have you seen this woman, Pat? I don't know. You just don't. She keeps getting kicked in the teeth, and she never turns her back on God. She just keeps being positive. She keeps battling it. And you just don't see people like this anymore. And what the demons are saying, if we could just make the headache a little bit worse, I think we can get her to curse God. She gets before the judgment seat of God. I think she's going to say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And so sometimes the good, it may not even be on this earth. It may be in eternal blessings, but God will work good in all things if we are called, love him, and are called according to his purpose. So if you're going through suffering right now, and you're in 828 mode, you say, I am trying to lean on God. I am trying to point us to God, and I see no good. I want to encourage you with this. People who suffer well, Paul, these verses are saying, let me just read it one more. You don't have to show it, but our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. And let me tell you, when Pat hears the "come and share your master's happiness," I promise you that her suffering will seem light and momentary at that point and for the rest of eternity. All right, let me just summarize. We'll wrap it up. So 5 points. Next slide, please. Okay, when in a storm, please remember, in this world you will have trouble. Don't believe the lie that if you chase after God, you're not going to have any cancer or any financial problems. This world's broken. We broke it. In this world, you will have trouble. All right? But point number 2, rest in the fact that Christ has overcome the world. He's defeated sin. He's defeated death, and so have you if you're in Christ. And then life is short. The next one, life is short, eternity's long. We got to constantly keep more of a eternal perspective. in good times, especially in bad times. And then number four, we're not in control, folks. We can't control it, but we can control how we respond. And how we respond tells the world who you trust and believe in. The greatest testimony you will ever have is how you respond to your storms. And then number five, when the storms come, be prepared to jump into 828 mode. You know, immediately. Don't miss the opportunity. And so I'm going to wrap it up here. I wish that you and I could dodge all the unpleasantness of life in a broken planet, but none of us get a pass. Some will have more suffering than others. You know, it's clear, but nobody gets the pass. The good news is you and I have the living God to be our strength and refuge to help us get through these sufferings on this earth, and more importantly, to take us to eternity with Him where there's no pain. I'm going to close by reading some verses in Matthew 7:24 through 27. And what I like about these verses is it points out that we all are going to go through storms. So I'll close with this. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock. The rain fell, the rain's coming, and the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who builds his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Well, thank you for letting me be here today, and we really honestly enjoy worshiping with you and look forward to seeing what this church does.